Hello and welcome to a new video on A Friend Remembers. This video is a little bit different. Had I been healthier this summer, I would have recorded a reaction video whilst I was halfway through playing Xenoblade Chronicles 3. It was one of my most anticipated games for 2022 and I had a blast playing it. But I missed the boat for various reasons. I wasn't well enough, so I didn't publish a reaction video. I wanted to. I would have just said what a lot of other people have said. It's a really good game. It's got some pretty critical flaws. I kind of wish it ran a bit smoother, but it's a good game. But enough time has now passed. I really want to discuss the ending. And this is not a response video to a recently put out video by a YouTuber called Luxins, where he points out that a lot of people have really fundamentally misunderstood the ending of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, because when you watch it, if you're not paying attention, you might think it's a devastating, heart-wrenching ending about people being separated. And he's like, no, actually, this is an ending of hope. And I'd really recommend, if you want a deep dive into what's really going on at the end of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, go check out Luxins' video. However, why did so many people consciously or unconsciously misunderstand the ending? And I want to point out my gut reaction to the ending and why I think the game unintentionally sabotages itself as you approach that final boss. So spoilers beware. If you've not played or you intend to play Xenoblade Chronicles 3, you really don't want to watch the end of this video, because it is going to rip out some of the revelations in the latter half of the game. You've been warned. So at the end of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, it is established that all of the characters have flame clocks. This is a 10-year counter. There is no way. I went into the game assuming that towards the end of the game they would find some way to overturn the flame clocks. It is one of the main themes of the game that one of the characters only has 3 months to live, and it's probably the best moment of the game when her time runs out and they manage to cheat death. They find a way of resetting her flame clock. She keeps going. It's really complicated, but it's also really satisfying. It's a simultaneously gut punch, devastating, and then triumph. Yes, I can't believe they did that. Oh wow, that's so clever moments. That is what I love, good storytelling. But having gone through such a finagled plot contrivances to keep Mio, one of your cast of 6, alive, there is no sign of any of the other characters being able. It is almost all but one of them. It would be impossible for them to do what she did. And even then, the means by which they did it, the character who enabled that has passed on. They no longer have that power. So I entered the last chapter of the game, now resigned to the idea, okay, so they've got more time. We've gone from only having days and weeks and months to a year or years left. That's enough time for the characters to beat the final enemy, save the day, and live out their twilight years before time runs out. But as heart-wrenching as that idea is, that these people are going to be heroes, they will save the world but then only have less than a year to live enjoying it, I was kind of resigned to that, because one of the big plots of the game is there is a group of people who are not on the flame clocks. There is an entirely... So the plot of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 features characters from the 2 distinct worlds, the world of the original Xenoblade Chronicles and the world of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. These are 2 separate dimensions which have become intermingled, and the entire cast of almost everyone in the game is from one of those worlds, and it's really obvious by which army they fight for. They're from one of those 2 worlds. It's the 2 worlds in conflict. So when you finish the game, you undo the blending of the worlds, you separate them, and the characters each go back to their own dimension. That seems fine, but the thing that concerned me is, what about the people from the city? What about the people who don't actually come from either of those 2 worlds? They are not the reincarnation, cloned souls of the people who were there when the universes were melded. They're original creations. People who are children and offspring, generations that have grown, lived and died in this planet. They're not in an endless now. They are living through their own timeline. They're living in hiding and fear and terrified at any moment that Mobius is going to discover where they are and kill them. But that's the plot of the game. And I reconciled my facts to the idea that towards the end of the game, you're fighting for the city. It's a big plot moment that you discover who the people in the city are, what their struggle is against Mobius, and the team all agree This is our purpose. We have to stop the war. We have to defeat Mobius because we have to protect the city. And when they die, the city will live on. The city people don't have this timer. Everyone else in the entire game, everyone you meet up until you enter the city, has less than 10 years to live. Even the whole first half of the game, I was thinking, well, if they stop the fighting, that's great, but that means civilization will exist for 10 years and then we'll all go extinct. But the city proves that there can be life beyond the end of the fighting. They didn't need to separate the dimensions. The Aionios, the planet, could have carried on. And I went into the final boss with that mindset. I knew who I was fighting for. I knew what I was fighting for. I was fighting to protect the city. And then the game throws a bit of a curveball at you. Now, this is my internal fan monologue. I was really hoping for the almost too obvious revelation that the final boss of the game, the villain, overarching nemesis, Zed, would be the reincarnation or the spirit or ghost or whatever you want to call it of Zanza, the villain from Xenoblade Chronicles 1. I mean, the whole point of Mobius is they are people who have died but whose souls refuse to give on, to accept that that was all the time they have, so they cling to what they call the endless now. They use the power of the souls that they are circulating through this spirit of death and rebirth and fighting and harvesting the energy of the souls of the people, sacrificing their lives into this meat grinder to give themselves immortality. So I thought, well, that would be perfect if the whole point of this plot is that the world of Xenoblade Chronicles 1, which was created by Zanza. He was the god who created it, and he was deposed by Shulk in that game. But Zanza was this mythological creator figure. When you got to the end, if it turns out it was his soul, his spirit, his I refuse to be dead lingering on, and although he had been killed by Shulk, the idea that he refused to go and he saw the opportunity of the two universes mingling to reinsert his influence, and he was recruiting other dead people to come back and prove that the dead people could reclaim the power of the world. Okay, it was almost too obvious a plot twist. I was hoping they would go that way. They didn't. They just said Zed is the spirit of refusing to die. It's the collective unconsciousness of people who don't want to go. That's a really deep plot hole, plot twist, story thread that I think deserves untangling on its own. But that final boss, it can take 45 minutes if you're not extremely overleveled. It's got so many phases where he depowers you and removes most of your abilities for significant portion, and then you feed him, bring him down to 0 health, and he just recharges. And there's multiple phases, but it's not like some Final Fantasy games where the boss transforms and mutates into a different form. He's the same guy through most of it. But anyway, eventually you wear him out. You show that it's the spirit of the game, your resilience, your refusal to submit, even though it seems pointless. Even though you beat him, he comes back. You beat him again, he comes back. Eventually you wear him down and he submits. If your determination to die is so great, who is he to prevent you? Who is he to hold the endless now over you and keep your soul circulating in eternity if you are so determined to bring an end to this? If you are so determined to accept the limited time you have remaining, to let that clock run out and then go into the great beyond peacefully, content that you've done the best you can with the time remaining to you. That was my mindset when I beat Zed. And then that's not what happens. The universes unmerge. Everyone goes back to the home dimension. But this game makes no reference to what happened from the people of the city. The people who don't come from one universe or the other. They were born in Aionios. They were born in this momentary, minuscule dimension that was only created and then uncreated in the blink of an eyeball. They almost never existed. Well, as Luxin pointed out, there was a line said by Melia at some point in the game saying, well, no, reality, what you experience is reality. These people do exist. It's one line. The ending is so focused on the story of Neo and Mia and their group of 6 main characters, and rightfully so, I walked away from the game feeling really downhearted. Not because I misunderstood Neo and Mio's story. The main cast are beautifully served by this ending. But I realised, I wasn't saving the people from the city. I was dooming them. I was uncreating the city. All these real humans, all these real people, the ones who I thought were going to go on and live their lives. Nope, that universe almost never existed. It did exist, but then it as good as didn't. And even though their souls maybe are collected by origin, the circumstances that gave rise to those people are just not in place. These same people are not going to be born again. Not the same way that the people in the cycle of the Endless Now were never quite exactly the same between each rotation. But I was really put out and felt down about this. I'd gone into that boss expecting the wrong things. I'd misunderstood who and what I was fighting for. And although I absolutely adored my time with Xenoblade Chronicles 3, that really upset me at the end. I really thought I was saving these people, and instead I was uncreating them. And that would be a fantastic plot twist in itself if the ending movie had even acknowledged that that was a mistake. Instead, the only thing you get is a brief scene of the people from the city standing in the corner as the worlds separate, and you have no idea what happens to them afterwards. Maybe the DLC would explore it. We still don't know if it's going to be a prequel or a sequel or a side story or what. But I think the ending of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is a really interesting one. As I said, what I was expecting and almost hoping for, they didn't do. They didn't bring Zanza back. He's dead. Shulk did do what Shulk did. Zed is something much more interesting and abstract, and I'm fine with that. What I'm not fine for is what I did or didn't do to the people in the city compared to what so much time and energy was expended on providing for the people in the city. Maybe Luxin's right, maybe their souls are saved, but I don't go by just one line of dialogue that's said in a cryptic fashion at a missable cutscene in the game. I expected better exposition or a better understanding about what was going to happen to these characters. And this isn't the first Xenoblade game to end with a cryptic ending, but I was satisfied at the ending of Xenoblade Chronicles 1 that I had a fairly good grasp on what happened to the majority of the characters, who had lived and who had died. Same for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, although there's some things in the ending of that game that are quite cryptic, I had a fairly good grasp on who had lived and who had died. But I don't have that in Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Who was I fighting to save? Well, it turns out I saved my 6 main characters, and the armies who were trapped in the Endless Now. But there's a whole third of the game's cast who are just cast into the abyss and abandoned. And that feels a little bit unfair to me. Anyway, if you've got any thoughts about that yourself, if you like the ending of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, comment below. Let me know your thoughts on this. Maybe I completely misread it. Maybe there's a lot more going on. It's a good game and a good plot, and particularly the twist about how Mio extended her life when her flame clock ran out. That was a beautiful chapter. But the ending itself, I really had mixed feelings about. I'm going to have to go back and replay it one day to see if now I'm not going into and expecting the wrong thing, if I'm a little less bamboozled by what does occur.